Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. What would you do if you suddenly found yourself in the hospital and the last person you ever expected to see shows up? Your long-lost mother, who disappeared 20 years ago. In today's story, the truth comes crashing down in the most unexpected way. Get ready for the shocking twist that will leave you questioning everything. Subscribe now and help us reach 1,000 followers to uncover more unbelievable stories like this one. Diep sat alone by the window, her gaze lost in the endless downpour outside. The rain hammered against the glass, each droplet a quiet echo in the silence of the room. Streetlights cast a faint, soft glow, their reflection merging with the image of Diep, bathed in the dim light. The room felt still, yet inside her, a storm brewed. Her mind raced, overwhelmed by the unexpected news she had just received. A family secret, long hidden and never spoken of, had surfaced. Her mother, who had vanished without a trace over 20 years ago, was suddenly being discussed again. The news struck her like a thunderclap, shaking her to the core. The fear crept into her chest, tightening her heart. She had no idea what this revelation meant, but it was enough to send her spiraling. The emotions hit her all at once, raw and uncontainable, like the torrents of rain outside. Suddenly, her legs gave way beneath her. The room spun as her vision blurred. Her breath became shallow, and she collapsed to the floor. James, who had been in the next room, rushed in at the sound of her fall. Panic gripped him as he saw her lying motionless. He couldn't wait for any explanation. His instinct took over. Without hesitation, he knelt beside her and lifted her into his arms. "Diep," he called out urgently, his voice thick with worry. But she couldn't answer. The storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos within her, and in that moment she felt entirely powerless. He held her against him, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to steady his breathing. His mind was a whirl of thoughts, but there was no time to process anything. He couldn't think, he could only act. He carried her gently, not knowing what lay ahead, but knowing with all his heart that he couldn't leave her side. Outside, the rain grew even heavier, as if nature itself was caught in their emotional turmoil. James held Diep close, the weight of the moment pressing on them both. The night had turned into something unrecognizable, a quiet tragedy unfolding in the shadows. James stood in the sterile hospital room, his hand gently holding Diep's as she lay in the bed. The soft beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound that filled the otherwise silent room. It felt as though time had slowed down, each second stretching into eternity. He watched her, his heart weighed down with worry, as her pale face remained calm, but the storm within her eyes had not faded. Diep had not said a word since they arrived at the hospital. She was lost in her own thoughts, her mind still reeling from the truth that had been thrust upon her. James could feel the unspoken words between them, thick in the air. He wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but the weight of her silence held him back. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead, his fingers trembling slightly. "Diep." His voice was soft, yet desperate. He knew she could hear him, but he wasn't sure if she could still feel him the way she used to. "Please, talk to me. Let me help you." But there was no answer. Only the rhythmic sound of the rain still pouring down outside, as if mocking his helplessness. It had been hours since she fainted, but to James it felt like days. His mind was racing, wondering what this secret had done to her. how it had fractured the peace she once carried with her. He took a deep breath, his mind torn between two worlds. He wanted to protect her, but he also needed to understand what had caused this storm inside her. What was it that had brought this fear to the surface? The past? The family she barely knew? His thoughts were interrupted as he heard a slight shift in her breathing. Diep stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. She turned her head slowly, her gaze meeting his. There was something different in her eyes now, something raw, something broken, like a piece of her that could never be fixed. He wasn't sure how to handle it, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going anywhere. He would stay by her side no matter what. The room felt smaller, the silence louder. James squeezed her hand once more, and the weight of the world seemed to press down on him. Outside, the rain continued to fall, relentless and unforgiving, much like the truths that had been revealed in this quiet moment of vulnerability. The hours passed slowly. The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to close in on Diep as she drifted in and out of a restless sleep. Her body felt heavy, and her mind struggled to process everything that had happened. The world outside the window, drenched in rain, mirrored her emotional state. Everything felt distorted, like she was trapped between two worlds: the past that had haunted her for so long, and the present that seemed to be unraveling before her eyes. James had not left her side. He sat quietly in the chair beside her bed, reading a magazine, but his eyes never strayed far from her face. His gaze lingered on her with a tenderness that he could never express aloud. He wanted to protect her from the world, from the weight of the past that seemed to have surfaced once again, but he didn't know how. Just as the silence seemed to stretch on indefinitely, a soft knock on the door broke the stillness. James looked up, his brow furrowing in confusion. The door opened slowly, and a woman stepped inside. She was dressed in a modest coat, her features hidden beneath the shadows of the evening light. Her face was familiar, yet he couldn't place where he had seen her before. "Excuse me." The woman's voice was gentle, but filled with an undercurrent of nervous energy. I'm looking for Diep." James stood up quickly, concern flashing across his face. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. The woman hesitated for a moment, her hands clasped tightly together. I'm her mother." The words hit deep like a freight train. Her heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat as her eyes flicked to the woman at the door. The person standing there, a stranger to her after 20 long years, was the mother she thought she had lost forever. Her mother, the one who had disappeared without a trace, was now standing before her. For a moment, Diep couldn't breathe. Her mind was racing, trying to process this impossible reality. James looked between the two women, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Diep's voice trembled as she spoke, her words barely audible. You're really here?" The woman stepped forward, her eyes soft with regret and years of sorrow. "I never meant to disappear. I never meant to leave you." Diep stared at her mother, her heart pounding in her chest, emotions conflicting within her. Anger, disbelief, relief. She didn't know how to feel. The storm outside intensified, but inside the room, another storm had begun to brew. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the weight of 20 years of unanswered questions. Diep stared at the woman who claimed to be her mother, trying to make sense of the woman standing before her. The world outside continued to pound with the relentless rain, as if nature itself could sense the turmoil inside. James stood quietly by the window, watching the interaction between the two women. His heart ached for Diep, knowing how much she had suffered in the absence of her mother. And now the person who had left her was back. It was a reunion, yes, but it was anything but joyous. There was no warmth in the air, only an uncomfortable tension that made it hard for anyone to breathe. Diep's voice finally broke the silence, her words tinged with disbelief. "Where have you been all this time? Why did you leave me?" Her mother's face tightened. The years of separation and guilt etched deeply into her features. She stepped closer to Diep's bed, her hands shaking slightly. "I never wanted to leave you, Diep, but there were things I couldn't control. I was forced to go away to protect you from a danger that I couldn't fight at the time." Diep felt the sting of those words, the sharpness of her pain rising to the surface. "Protect me? You left me alone, in a world that was already breaking apart. You left me to grow up without knowing the truth." Tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she sank to her knees beside Diep's bed. I know how much it hurt, but it was never my choice. There were things I couldn't tell you, things that might still put you in danger." Diep recoiled at the mention of danger. Her heart raced, and the memories of the years she had spent alone came crashing back. James, sensing the rising tension, stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. "What are you saying? What kind of danger are you talking about?" The woman looked at him, her expression serious. "It's something from the past, something that's never truly gone away, and it's why I stayed away, because I couldn't let it reach Diep. But now, I think it's time she knows everything." Diep's chest tightened. What could possibly be so dangerous that it had kept her mother away for so long? And what was this secret that seemed to have followed her all these years? Outside, the rain began to subside, but inside the hospital room, a new storm was just beginning to form. A storm of truths, half-spoken words, and the secrets that had been buried for far too long. The tension in the room grew unbearable. Diep's heart raced as her mother's words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. The storm outside had eased, but inside, it felt as though the storm was only beginning. Diep struggled to comprehend the words that had just been spoken. Her mother, the woman she had assumed to be lost forever, was claiming that there were things, dangerous things, that had kept her away all these years. James, sensing the fragile state of the moment, took a step forward, his voice calm yet insistent. "What do you mean by dangerous? If there's something going on, we need to know now." Diep's mother hesitated, her eyes filled with a sadness that only years of pain could have created. She looked down at her hands, clutched tightly together. "It's not something I can explain easily," she whispered, "but when I left, it wasn't to abandon you. It was to protect you from something much bigger than I could handle. There were people, dangerous people who would have hurt you, hurt us both." Diep's breath caught in her throat. She had heard whispers of danger in her past, fragments of stories that never seemed to add up. But never had she imagined this. Her mother speaking of a threat so great that it could force her into hiding. "Who are they? What did they want? Diep's voice trembled with a mix of fear and anger. Her mother looked up at her, her eyes wet with unshed tears. They were part of a larger organization, one that I've spent my life running from. They were after something I had, something that belonged to your father. She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a shadow. The only way to protect you was to disappear, to leave everything behind. I had no choice. James felt a chill run down his spine as he tried to absorb the gravity of the situation. And now? Why are they coming back now? The woman's gaze flickered to Diep, then to James. Because they never gave up. They've been looking for you, Diep, and now they've found us. The room fell into a heavy silence as Diep struggled to process the flood of information. Her mind reeled, caught between the shock of her mother's sudden reappearance and the revelation of the dangers she had unknowingly lived with all these years. Outside, the last drops of rain fell, and in the quiet aftermath, Diep finally whispered, "So, this is why you left me? To keep me safe?" Her mother nodded, her face lined with sorrow. "I never wanted to leave you, but I thought it was the only way. And now, I fear it might be too late." Diep's heart pounded as the weight of her mother's words sank in. The past she had long buried was resurfacing, and with it, a new storm that would test everything she thought she knew about herself, her family, and the world she had lived in. The silence in the room stretched long, each breath heavy with the burden of the truths now revealed. Diep's mind was spinning, struggling to catch up with the whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Her mother's words had shattered the fragile world she had built around herself. The idea that she had been living under the shadow of an unseen danger for so long felt like a cruel twist of fate. But what did it all mean now? What was she supposed to do with this newfound knowledge? James watched Diep closely, his expression filled with concern and quiet resolve. He had always been the protector, the one who had stepped in when no one else had. But now, seeing Diep on the edge of this emotional precipice, he wasn't sure how to help her make sense of the chaos inside her. Diep's eyes, once filled with strength, now seemed to hold a deep uncertainty. She turned her gaze toward her mother, her voice quiet but firm. "If you knew this, if you knew they were looking for me, why didn't you come sooner?" Her mother's face twisted with regret. The years of separation reflected in the lines on her face. "I wanted to, Diep, more than anything, but I couldn't risk bringing them back into your life. I couldn't risk them finding you." Diep closed her eyes, her thoughts a tangled mess. She could feel the weight of everything, the pain of the past, the fear for the future, and the responsibility of being the one who now had to make a choice. It wasn't just about her anymore. It wasn't just about the life she had fought so hard to build. It was about the people she loved. It was about James, who had never turned his back on her, even in the darkest of times. And it was about her mother, who had returned, not out of love, but out of necessity. She opened her eyes, meeting James's gaze. His steady presence, his unwavering support, had always been a constant in her life. And now, he was here, standing by her side as the storm within her raged on. She could feel the weight of his love, his concern, pressing down on her. "What should we do, James?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a lifetime of questions. James stepped closer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. grounding her in the present moment. "Whatever you decide, Diep, you don't have to face this alone. We'll figure it out together, no matter what." Her heart swelled with gratitude for his words. But still, the question lingered in the air. What would she do with the truth? What kind of life would she choose now, with everything she had lost and everything that might be waiting for her? As the rain outside began to die down, Diep knew that the real storm had only just begun, one that would change everything, forever. The moments stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Diep sat in the stillness of the hospital room, her thoughts racing as she faced the overwhelming weight of the situation. Her mother, once a distant memory, now stood before her, a living ghost from the past. The storm outside had finally stopped, but the storm inside her heart seemed far from over. James remained at her side, his presence a constant anchor in the swirling chaos of her emotions. He was the one person who had never abandoned her, who had always stood beside her in the quiet moments of fear, in the loud moments of joy, and now, in this moment of uncertainty, his steady hand on her shoulder was a reminder that she didn't have to carry the burden alone. Diep turned her gaze to her mother, her heart torn between anger and confusion. "Why didn't you trust me?" Her voice shook, but she fought to keep it steady. "Why didn't you tell me what was happening? I could have helped." Her mother's eyes softened with sorrow, and she reached out to gently touch Diep's hand. "I wanted to protect you, Diep, but I also wanted to protect you from the truth. The kind of truth that can tear everything apart. And now," she paused, her eyes clouded with regret. "Now, I can only hope it's not too late." James spoke quietly, his voice firm with a sense of resolve. "We need to know everything. If there's a threat, we need to face it head on. Running, hiding, it's not going to protect anyone. Not anymore." Diep's gaze shifted between James and her mother. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy blanket. She knew he was right. The world she had known had been a lie, a fragile illusion that had been shattered, and the truth, no matter how painful, was the only thing that would set her free. With a deep breath, she turned back to her mother. "Tell me everything. I need to know the whole truth." Her mother hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She sat beside Diep, her hands trembling as she began to speak. "It's about the family business. Your father was involved with some very dangerous people. People who would do anything to get what they want. When I found out what they were planning, I knew I had to protect you, but I couldn't do it alone. I made the decision to disappear, to cut ties with everything, to keep you safe. I didn't want you to grow up with the knowledge of that danger hanging over your head." Diep's heart skipped a beat. "The family business? I had no idea." Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "No one did. Not even your father knew the full extent of it. They were too powerful, too dangerous. And now," she trailed off, her eyes dark with fear, "now they're coming after you. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Diep felt the air in the room grow heavy. The walls, once a source of comfort, now seemed to close in on her. The past she had fought so hard to forget was coming back to claim her. The danger that had haunted her mother's every step had now found its way to her doorstep. James stood up, his voice full of determination. "We won't let them hurt her. We'll face this together, whatever it takes." Diep's heart pounded, her thoughts spinning out of control. What was she supposed to do now? What kind of life could she live with this truth, with this danger looming over her? The storm outside had passed, but a new storm was on the horizon. And this time, Diep knew she couldn't run from it.
Diep bất ngờ nhập viện sau một cơn ngất xỉu, và khi cô tỉnh lại, một điều bất ngờ xảy ra là mẹ ruột người đã mất tích hơn 20 năm bỗng xuất hiện trước mặt cô. Mẹ cô giải thích rằng vì sự nguy hiểm từ những kẻ thù trong gia đình, bà buộc phải rời xa Diep để bảo vệ cô. Diep cảm thấy sốc và đau đớn khi nhận ra rằng bí mật sâu kín bà đã giấu suốt bao nhiêu năm, và những câu hỏi về quá khứ, sự nóng vội và nguy hiểm ngang đời chờ đợi cô giải quyết. Sự xuất hiện của mẹ là tín hiệu cho một cuộc chiến mới, và Diep phải đối mặt cả về tình cảm lẫn sự an toàn.